Hello, everyone, and it is time for my next retro handheld hardware review. I wanted to try these with the original Game Boy, but as I said in the text review for this on the website, my original Game Boy is occasionally dead. It had an unfortunate accident over a decade ago in a sink full of water, so it sometimes turns on, sometimes doesn't. Instead, we're going to start with the next best thing, and what I was going to do after the Game Boy, which is this, the Game Boy Color. So, the Game Boy Color is very similar in form factor to the Game Boy, so we're going to talk about the design first. It has a very vertical feel to it. Rather than widescreen, because a lot of handhelds you hold like this now. PlayStation Vita, the 3DS, and even though the 2DS has a vertical form factor, you still kind of hold it like this. So, it has vertical form factor. And then on the front we have our big screen right here. We got the screen that shows color right here. Little icon that turns on to tell you the power's on. And then we got our interface down here and our huge mono speaker. I mean, this is probably as big as the mono speaker on the 2DS. So then we don't have a whole lot of button interface, just a D-pad, A, B, and then start and select. Hopefully yours doesn't have the select button partly eaten away. I don't know how that happened. I'm not going to go into it. So, for the rest of the design, on the left-hand side, we have a little turnable wheel here for the volume control. And then up here is the proprietary port for the link cable and a few other accessories that came around for the Game Boy, like the Game Boy printer. And then we look on the right side. All that's here is the switch to turn the system on and off. On, off. Then we direct our focus to the back. Up here we have the cartridge slot, which looks very similar to the Game Boy cartridge slot and the Game Gear cartridge slot. So you just click a Game Boy Color or normal Game Boy cartridge in and you can play a game. Then down here we got the battery compartment. I've already taken the slot off to show you the inside of this, rather than the 4 batteries that the Game Boy takes, or the 6 batteries that the Game Gear takes. The Game Boy Color only takes 2 AA batteries to work. This is very convenient, as I'll explain later in the review. For the last part of the design, we'll look at the bottom. Not really much down here. We've got our little headphone jack right here. So, now let's talk about performance. The way it feels in your hand, I'll admit I used this to death when I was a little kid, but now with today's more comfortable handhelds, it feels awkward. Like when I hold it like this, my fingers are constantly overlapping, and it just feels weird to have them overlapping. I just kind of want to go back to this so that my fingers can be at least a little bit apart so they're not constantly overlapping each other when I'm playing. It is still perfectly playable, but it just feels weird. And then the next thing we want to talk about is the mono speaker. The problem with the mono speaker here is, with today's standards, mono audio is pretty unacceptable. I don't mind mono audio, and I don't mind that the Nintendo 2DS has a mono speaker on it, but if you start going with the rest of the community, you'll get all these people complaining, going up the wall about how mono speakers are 100% unacceptable in anything. Stereo sound has been the way to go for years and years and years and years. Just something to say about the mono speaker. The problem with the Game Boy Color's mono speaker is the headphone jack. On the Nintendo 2DS, if you plug in headphones, if you plug in headphones on the 2DS, the audio turns from mono to stereo in the headphones. When you plug headphones into a Game Boy Color, the mono audio goes from mono to mono. When I had headphones in on this, almost all of the sound was coming out of the right speaker and pretty much nothing was coming out of the left. You're getting mono audio no matter what you're using for the audio input. And then the final thing we need to talk about is the screen. The screen doesn't have a backlight to it, like all the old Game Boy models did not have. So this was good and bad at the same time. The good thing is, I can put 2 batteries in this thing, brand new, and they'll last more than 30 hours straight before they'll die. That is amazing for a handheld. Even back then, that was amazing. Mostly because of how battery technology has improved over the past couple decades. Now, the bad thing is this screen. Since it doesn't have a backlight, you pretty much can't play it outside on a sunny day. The glare is just too much, and you can't see anything on the screen unless you have one of those attachments that has a light that shines onto the screen. Fortunately, I do not have one of those to show you today. The only other problem with the screen is that it requires a specific angle to look at it. Because, I mean, if you look at it right now, it looks really weird and faded. Looks okay right there. Looks terrible right there. So, if you really want to play this, you're going to have a very specific angle at it. Otherwise, you're going to have very degraded and faded out screen quality. Now, overall, what can I say about the Game Boy Color? The battery life is its biggest asset. The battery life lasts over 30 hours. Holy crap, 30 hours. That's really not about turnaround when you have to replace batteries. But the main faults of the system, like I said, the mono speaker, the mono audio through the headphones or the speaker, the odd feel when your fingers are overlapping when you're playing, and the screen quality, basically requiring the attachment with the light or holding it at a very specific angle when you have it inside the house. Now, I like the Game Boy Color. I've spent many hours with this thing, but Reviews to Go rates the Game Boy Color a 7 out of 10. If you have any comments, feel free to leave them below on YouTube or head to my site at www.reviewstogo.com through the links in the following outro.